Welcome, 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 welcome. You gotta say welcome at least 6 times. There's a little bit of a lag before the thing starts picking up and recording any sound, so that's what I'm doing. Welcome to DBT numero nueve. Mixing up the language there because I know very little of any other languages, and that's one thing I can say. Number 9, yeah, we are moving like a stream that rushes through the forest. How was that for a mindful way to say that? We're moving from whatever we were doing to whatever we're doing now. That's the sign of preparation, that kind of a statement. No, we've been working on core mindfulness skills, and we're moving into interpersonal effectiveness. We're going to talk about a couple of tips for interpersonal effectiveness today that I believe are key to understanding the skills that we will be covering in greater depth later. To recap, we covered distress tolerance first, which is very important because it helps you to tolerate distress. Distress tolerance is all about survival, once again, surviving what you're going through. Moving into core mindfulness after that. Core mindfulness is about basically living your life in a day-to-day way that is meant to reduce stress through the use of mindfulness. And now we're going to be talking about interpersonal effectiveness, which has to do with the social interaction that you are having. Being interpersonally effective just refers to being able to have some more control in your social life with people. More control might not be a good way to say that. Basically, it's more stability. That's what you're looking for. Most people find that if they are overwhelmed by the emotional reactions in their life, then they will be overwhelmed by the interactions that they have with other people in particular. Social things are a big anxiety source and can be very overwhelming for everybody. So that's what we're going to talk about. And we are going to get into some of the specific elements that kind of are the underpinnings of interpersonal effectiveness. One of them you will not be shocked by. In order to be interpersonally effective, you have to approach things mindfully. Whoa, what? Say mindfulness again? What the? Okay. Here's the deal. When this goes, mindfulness is a big part of all DBT. So what you're looking for, when we say mindfulness in relation to interpersonal or social effectiveness, what we're really talking about is the attention that you pay. So yes, I'm using the word mindful again, and that might or might not be annoying to you, but it's important. Mindful living in the moment, attention, being what attention am I paying to the person that I'm talking to and to myself, to the actual exchange. One of the things that is interesting about anxiety is that anxiety is usually not about the present moment. That's why mindfulness is such a big part of DBT. Anxiety usually has to do with things I'm worried about happening in the future or worried about that have happened before. And both of those become fixated and personified in the person with whom I am talking when I'm having a social interaction. Maybe the person is someone who I've had some kind of interaction with in the past that is concerning to me. Perhaps they are some type of person who I'm worried about what's going to happen. Think of a boss or a teacher or someone who's going to evaluate my performance, maybe even a spouse or a family member who I'm worried about the effects or the outcome of this conversation. Any of those same people, by the way, I could have had other experiences with before now that I just started singing there for some reason, that can contribute to the levels of anxiety that we are having. And so mindful attention means trying to take all those other skills that we've been talking about so far, participating, observing, being non-judgmental about the moment, trying to apply that to this interaction. It doesn't mean that you abandon all the knowledge you have about the person from the past or all of the anticipation of things in the future, but as much as possible, and as much as healthy, you want to live in the moment and try to pay attention to what is happening right now. I'll tell you a couple ways to sort of do that and start working on that. One of them is very simple to understand. All of mindfulness is simple to understand. It's just not easy to do. One way is to ask yourself this question. What is happening? What's happening? That's also how you can start a conversation. What's happening? No. What is happening with me? My typing skill is turning against me. What's happening with me right now in this conversation? Being mindful and attentive doesn't mean I'm just staring at the person and only paying attention to what they're saying, although that is an important part of communication. I also need to be aware of what's happening with me emotionally. If I am freaked out because this person is someone I had a conflict with once upon a time, I should be aware of that. Oh, I am feeling freaked out. That is actually paying mindful attention. I am feeling freaked out because the last time we talked, this person was unfair with me, or I did not like what they said. What be happening with them is the other question that you could be asking yourself about the mindful attention of what is happening right now. What's happening with them? What do they seem to be doing or saying right now? This is actually very important and actually harder than we might think if we don't really think about it. If we think about it, it gets harder. The hard thing about paying attention to what's going on with them is, number one, being, I'm aware of the feelings that I have, but I also don't want to project that onto them. Projection being the defense mechanism first coined by Sigmund Freud in the old days of psychology. Thought I was going to throw out a date there. This isn't a history class. So the thing that is hard is not to project my anticipation, my anxieties onto that person, or even project my memory of the past or my worries of the future. If it's my, person, there we go, my person that I'm talking to, there's a specific example, who I had a conflict with last week, and I'm like, they're still mad, they're still mad, they're still mad, they're still mad. I'm projecting that onto them. And one of the reasons that I ask myself the question, what is actually happening with them right now? Well, as far as I can tell, are they being rude to me this moment? If not, then that's not happening right now. And if I'm saying, oh, see, they hate me, they hate me, they hate me. Well, they're not acting like they hate me right now. So asking myself the question, what is happening right now with them? They're being polite. And if they're being polite, I maybe should just let them be polite right now and not go, they hate me, they hate me, they hate me. And it can help to mitigate and control that anxiety that's rising up, which then theoretically will lead me to make better decisions in my communication with that person. Simple to say, hard to do. Here's the other thing. Us. What's happening with us right now? You see, there's three going on with any social kind of thing. In fact, we call it, sometimes we call it triangulation. If you think of a triangle, there's the me and the them and the us. Well, triangles also work with three people. We're not talking about that now. So what's going on with us as a relationship right now? I don't mean what's going on with us in our deeper quality of relationship. I mean what's going on with the us of right now. If we just had a fight last week, how is that affecting the way that the us is functioning? That's a really weird therapeutic way to think of that. The us, if you think of the us, think of these things. I didn't draw this on the white thing, the word board, but think of two people, two individuals. There is a me and there's a them, but then there's a third entity, which is the crossover of those two. A little bit here, that's the us. What's going on with the us? There we go. Universal symbol for us. That's soon to be. Take it by storm, the world. Way to go. Be attentive to that and say, what's going on with us right now? If we did just fight last week, is that affecting the way that we're talking? This is a little different than just saying what's going on with them. So if I go through these three, let's say I'm going through and saying, what's going on with me? Oh, I'm kind of a little upset about that thing that we fought about last week. What's going on with them? They seem to be being polite, but maybe they're being a bit awkward. I can't really tell. They're not doing anything obviously rude or awkward to me right now, so I can focus on that. They're being polite. I'm also being polite. I know what's going on with each of us. And then there's the us. What is going on with the us part? Well, what if the us part is a bit stilted and awkward? Perhaps that could lead me to make some different decisions. Maybe I'll just call it out and say, hey, I feel like this is awkward because we had that thing last week. Maybe I'll try it. And if I'm asking that question, what about us? I might notice that it's awkward for both of us. Then again, maybe I just won't mention it at all. And maybe I'll just take a comfort in here and know, oh, they seem to be a bit awkward and uncomfortable too. They are at the same advantage and disadvantage that I am. So we're on equal footing. I guess I can feel a little more confident, maybe a little less anxious. Or maybe I'll feel more anxious because, hey, it's awkward. Nobody likes that. That's anxiety provoking. And maybe I'll actually worry about it. But even if I'm doing that, I still know that it's happening when I'm asking these questions. And it gives me something to do in my brain. other than what I sometimes do in my brain when I'm anxious, which is, as if you are still listening to the video after that noise, props to you, because that was annoying. And that's what anxiety is. It's annoying. So when I'm flooded with that emotion, then a lot of times what happens is I freak out in my head. And this process of asking, what is happening right now with me, with them, and with us, that can help to distract from the anxiety process. See that? So that's the first step of mindful attention. Now, here's a deeper, more proactive thing that has to do with that. Know your own tendencies. Most of us, there we go. Most of us, if we are in a situation of interpersonal interaction, particularly if it's an anxiety-provoking interaction or potentially a confrontation or something like that, we have habits of how do we usually handle these things. What are my habits? What are my habits? What are they? What do you tend to do when you're confronted? I mean, this is as simple as asking yourself this question that I just said. What do you tend to do when you're confronted with the need to be social? Do you get nervous? Do you doubt yourself? Do you tend to get more puffed up and act confident? Do you tend to defer to other people? Do you tend to try to play the expert and give your opinion a lot? Do you tend to be quick to correct someone? Do you tend to not ever correct someone? Do you tend to not say something, even if your mouth is full of something? I think the word something is what usually goes in that expression. So just asking yourself, and this is actually a good thing to do proactively when you're not in the situation. Sit down and ask yourself, what do I do? How do I handle myself? One of two things will probably happen if you ask yourself this question. You'll either go, oh, I got some examples right here in my head. Or you'll go, I don't know, which is what a lot of us do when we try to actually think of things like this. So then what you do is you treat the next interaction that you have, or series of interactions. You go to work tomorrow, you go to the store later today, whatever, and you watch yourself as if you are writing a book report on your social habits and your tendencies. And you go and do this. Treat it like an experiment. One of the great things of any kind of life change, and this is not DBT really, this is D here talking. One of the great things of any change is being willing to become a scientist about your own life, being willing to experiment and get data and say, I am not required to go out today and live any type of perfect life. That's too much stress, too much pressure, and you should try to let yourself off that hook. And if there's anyone in your life who is not willing to let you off that hook, as much as possible, you want to get off the hook of having them in your life if that's possible, and if not, you want to try to ignore them. How about that for an interpersonally effective strategy? You don't have to be anything at all. And so therefore, since I don't have to be anything right now today, I can go out and experiment and see what I am and how I be doing functioning, right? You know what I'm saying? Yeah, so what are my habits? What are my tendencies? Get to know those. I'm going to give you two options, two most common. And let's say, instead of just options, let's treat these like different extremes. We all vacillate at times between aggressiveness and passivity, if you will, in our habits. Some of us tend to be more aggressive, some of us tend to be more passive, and we tend to fluctuate in between these two. Like I said, treat these like two polar opposites of a great scale. One side is aggressive, one side is passive. I guess one extreme would be, if aggressive, would be violent and actually confrontational with everyone. One extreme, passive, would be completely submissive, even to someone who is abusive to me, which all of us will tend to do more the more we're in an abusive setting. Usually we have one natural go-to reaction. If we are confined in an abusive setting or remain in an abusive setting long enough, most of us will get submissive eventually. If we get aggressive eventually, that leads to violence, and that leads to a really bad situation unless we get out of it. But most of us have a natural inclination to go one way or the other. Ask yourself this, is where do I usually land on that scale, particularly when I am given the opportunity to have confrontation, friction, or to feel awkward and uncomfortable? Do I usually treat it and try to survive that experience by being passive and submissive, or do I usually get more aggressive? Do I turn up the heat, or do I get cool and slower down? That's what you want to ask yourself. Now, the other thing is that this is not an absolute, and these are not mutually exclusive in all settings. Do I get submissive with some people and aggressive with others? Do I get submissive at work and come home and become aggressive towards my family? Or the other way around, do I get totally submissive in a family situation and then I go to work and I'm super nasty to customers or other people? Yeah, so how do I deal with those things? Think of those two, aggressiveness and passiveness, as these two extremes that we bounce between like a tennis ball, like a pong ball in the old video game Pong, and say, when do I bounce? This is another time when it's good to sort of study out the things that you are running into. And if you can do that, you can get some good data. Yes. So data. It's not just that robot from Star Trek The Next Generation anymore. Okay, one other thing to be aware of for mindful attention is the question of wants and needs. You can call them either one, or wants and needs. They could be somewhat synonymous. We can make a big difference between them, but we're not going to do that right now. In fact, let's combine them. Jen just called them weeds. We all have weeds, wants and needs that pop up. And just like weeds, they pop up everywhere. And sometimes they can be really annoying, particularly if there's someone else's weeds. And we wish we could pull them, but we can't. So, yeah, that's good. I like that. Patent pending on the weeds thing. Copyright today, at this moment. So we all have these weeds, these wants and needs that pop up. One thing that we can ask ourselves is, what are my weeds in this situation if I'm dealing with this person? And what are their weeds in this situation? What's popping up that maybe I knew it was going to come and I expected it, or what is it? What do they want out of this encounter? What do I want out of this encounter? Being aware of that actually will be a big, big step towards making you much more effective at social situations than most people, because most people are only aware of their own weeds. They know that they want something or need something, and they go into it and they say, I want this, I want this, I want this, and they just get frustrated the other person isn't giving it to them. If we train ourselves to be more aware of what the other person wants and needs, we will have less friction and less conflict and be stronger and more confident and all that good stuff. So that can help as well. So look at the weeds. Look into the weeds. That's a thing, right? Yeah, that works. Next week, we will be back. Well, I'll be back. I hope you'll be here with me watching and watching and watching and watching. And as you do so, what you probably find is that we're talking about interpersonal effectiveness. I think next week I'm going to talk about Dear Man. You want to Google that. If you want to Google it, Google it. You can Google anything you want. I'm not the king of your Google life. But under the interpersonal effectiveness, Dear Man is actually one of the very, very dear acronyms that exists within DBT. So I'll just, Google Dear Man and the letters D, B, and T together as an acronym, and you'll probably find something interesting if you want to pre-study for it. That's all for today. Thank you for watching, and look back here at the Broken Brain Podcast YouTube channel for more interesting psychological tips, as well as these DBT workshops. Tune on over to the Broken Brain Podcast and get it on iTunes or dwighthurst.com/podcast. You can also go to that same site I just mentioned and click the archives up above, or you can go to dwighthurst.com/archives and see all of our past podcast episodes. There's a bunch of CEU trainings for professionals that we've done in our group practice. And then there's a bunch of episodes I've done with panel discussions, people talking about mental health and wellness. So that's all available for you. All you got to do is take it. It's yours. See you next week. Have a good day, everyone. And remember to pay mindful attention to all